Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, depending on where you are, what time you're listening to this. My name is Winston, the content marketing guy, and today we have a very special guest with us. Very excited to have her on, Ashley Faus. Ashley, how are you doing? How are things where you are?
I'm doing good. It is, I guess, good morning slash good afternoon for me where I am. So good to be here.
Right, because you're on the Pacific time. That's correct?
Yep, Pacific time. So headed into lunchtime here shortly.
All right, awesome. All right, guys. So before we actually get into what we want to discuss today, let me just tell you a bit about Ashley and how amazing she is. So Ashley has held several positions as marketing manager. Then, later when she started specializing in content marketing, which you guys know is a topic I'm very interested in, she has held positions as senior manager for content strategy and marketing communications for, Oracle. Moved on to become a senior product marketing manager, and most recently, her job is now content strategy lead for software teams at Atlassian. So I'm very excited to have you on, Ashley. And that's not only the only positions you've held. I mean, you've held several positions before that. So before we dive right into it, what I'd love for you to do is just to share with us your story, your journey, how you got into marketing, and how you got to where you are right now to being content lead.
Sure. So I my bio says marketer, writer, speaker by day, and singer, actor, fitness fiend by night, and that all of that plays into how I ended up where I am. So I actually started college as a musical theater major, had some vocal issues my freshman year, and so I was looking to change majors, and I was like, I don't know. What do I like to do? What am I interested in? So I took an intro to marketing class, and the opening sentence of the textbook was marketing is about people. And I was like, done. This is my major. So for me, I'm very passionate about connecting problems and solutions. And I'm also really passionate about kind of like digging around in people's heads and figuring out like what makes them tick, and then using that for good to help them match problems and solutions. And so for me, content is the way that those problems and solutions get matched up. I take a really comprehensive view of content. So it's not just written blog posts, or it's not just short form tweets, or it's not just video, it's all of it. And so as we think about how the audience journey comes to life, content is the place. Like, yes, you use products and you buy services and those kinds of things, but how do you learn about them? How do you improve them? How do you incorporate them? From my perspective, content is kind of the fuel that drives all of that. And so that's how I slowly but surely have kind of honed into the content creation and distribution side of the marketing discipline, and working across, strategy, execution, management, those types of things.
All right, awesome. And you said two things that I definitely want to underscore, which is the whole aspect of marketing being about psychology, understanding how people think, getting into their psyche, and I ended up becoming or getting into marketing by chance as well. And I always tell myself that if I wasn't a marketer, the next field I would definitely pursue would be psychology, for that very same reason, right? But also, you also said something that reminded me of a conversation I was having yesterday on LinkedIn where, someone made a post about content marketing being about, written posts, blog posts. And, my idea was, or my question was, well, why is it that we're still limiting content to written blog posts and SEO? I mean, as you said, content is video, content is podcast, like what we're doing right now. Content is a tweet or infographic. So it's the whole 9 yards and not necessarily just one aspect of a content format, so to speak. With that in mind, actually want to ask you about this quote because you said that the first marketing book you ever opened, it says that marketing is all about people. And how I actually found out about you, for those who don't know, I actually came across Stuart Hillhouse because I follow him on LinkedIn. He has a podcast, Top of Mind, with Stuart Hillhouse, and he made a post about the episode that you did with on his podcast. That's how I ended up clicking on it, and And it's so funny because usually I don't really listen to podcasts much these days, but I actually clicked on this one and I said, all right, let me spend the first 3-5 minutes just to, because the post that he wrote or the copy kind of sparked my curiosity. So I said, all right, let me click on it, spend about 5 minutes, see what this topic is about. And then 5 minutes turned into like the full 40-minute episode where I literally listened to it from start to end, right? And
Oh, nice.
yeah, and I loved it so much, which is the reason why I definitely wanted you to be a guest and happy that you accepted. But in that episode, you said you have to love your audience. And that clicked for me on so many levels because what
Yeah.
I do, I love marketing. I'm passionate about marketing. I'm passionate about us as marketers, how we think, why we do the things we do, how can we make it better. So when you said that, it really resonated with me. But probably you can share with us why is that important? Because as you rightly said, people just think about their audiences as personas that they need to market to, versus actually loving your audience. So why is that important for you?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things. I think one is that, and there's been a couple of different people who have talked about this, about having an opinion and being very opinionated. And so the only way to have an opinionated point of view is to have knowledge about the subject. And so when we relate that to loving our audience, if they're experts in this thing and they have knowledge about a subject and you're trying to speak to them with an opinion, you also have to have knowledge about the subject, which
Right.
means you also have to love the same things they love, right? So it's all this kind of interconnected stuff that you can tell when someone is BSing you. Like, you can tell when someone's like, you don't really know what you're talking about, and then you don't trust them, right? Like,
Right,
you don't want to have that
right.
conversation with them. And so if you're trying to make this connection with the audience and you're BSing them, like, they're going to know it and they're not going to trust you and they're not going to want to buy from you. Even if the product or service is great, if they don't think you know what you're talking about from a subject matter or expertise level, they're going to think that you also don't know what you're talking about from a product level. Like, if you don't fundamentally understand my problems, how would you actually be able to solve these problems with whatever the thing is that you're selling? And this is particularly true. So over the last 5 years or so, I've been working in spaces that sell to developers, and developers have like a very fine-tuned BS radar, and they are very allergic to any marketing. And so
That's true.
it's a challenge, right? Like, they don't trust marketers. And so if I show up basically just trying to sell, like, they're immediately saying, I don't trust you, I don't think you know. And so there's always these kind of like vetting questions of like, do you actually know what I'm talking about? In some cases, the answer is yes. In other cases, the answer is no, because that's not my space, right? So it's a really fine line of, kind of proving yourself and building that trust without it feeling fake or without it feeling like you have an agenda. And that's where I get at, you have to really love the audience, because when you have a genuine friendship or you have a genuine relationship with somebody, the value exchange is implicit. It's not transactional. And so if you build that same mindset with your audience, then you will want to solve their same problems. You'll have things whenever you just go about the world as like, oh, I wonder how so-and-so would think about that, right? Like, just that mindset shift that happens if you treat it as relationship instead of transactional.
Right. And that makes so much sense. And it's true, especially when it comes to software developers. Shifting gears now, this whole idea of the content playground. Let's talk about that, because that's what we really want to get into. How do you first come up with the idea? Well, first of all, what is it? Let's help people define what it is. And also, how do you first come up with the idea of a content playground?
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting because I think I've been calling it the playground model. And it was basically it was in response to the funnel, where everybody is constantly talking about, oh, we need to map this to the funnel. We need to create awareness content, or we need to create bottom of funnel content. And what I realized as I was trying to create content, and then as I was, buying products and services, and this idea that, like, we're just going to push you down through this funnel. And I'm like, this is stupid. Nobody thinks this way. Nobody buys this way. We don't go about our lives being like, today I have decided to be in the awareness phase. It's like, no, right? And so when we think about, again, marketing is about people and it's about matching problems and solutions, nowhere in there is this sense of like, we need to create X number of pieces of content per funnel phase. And so I started thinking about it and I was like, what is a more realistic picture of how people navigate a buyer's journey or an experience or solving a problem? And so I was kind of just like pushing on different analogies. And first I came up with a jungle gym, which I don't know if you have like global listeners, but it's basically this piece of equipment that's like this kind of cage thing and you can climb on it. But there's kind of two objectives. It's to get to the top and it's to go across the middle without touching the hot lava below. And so that's still me as a marketer forcing you into a journey that I want you to go on. And if I look at the journeys that I've enjoyed the most and the brands that I feel affinity for and that I just champion, it's a delightful experience, it's low pressure, and it provides value to me at every turn. And so when I started thinking about that, I was like, man, playgrounds, like playground designers are freaking smart. They can entertain kids for hours. And if you think about like your audience has a short attention span, they only want to have fun. They only want to do what they want to do. Like the playground's kind of the perfect model for it. And so that's kind of how I came up with it. And in terms of thinking about what it is, it's a way to delight your audience. It's a way to engage them. It's a way to let them chart their own journey. It's a way to let them enter and exit as they please. Again, I just think about, especially for some of these big SaaS products where this is, the renewal only comes up maybe every 3 years, or if somebody leaves the company, are they going to take you with them? And so maybe they leave the playground for a little bit, but then they move back and they come back to the neighborhood and it's like, man, playground still there. I can still play on it. It's still great. How do you facilitate that as a marketer? How do you make a journey that's so good and so smart that people want to keep coming back to it, even if their immediate need is not to buy something right this minute?
Right. And that makes a lot of sense. But here's what I'd love to ask you though. So what's the real difference between really the content playground and the funnel? Because I'm just thinking out loud in terms of how we've been taught to really think about it in terms of the funnel, as you mentioned. We start at awareness, consideration, then decision, and that entire buyer's journey. But what's the difference if I just create content at each stage, but at the same time, I'm not forcing you? So it's not necessarily about the approach, but it's more about the mindset of how you think about your buyers, that we're not trying to force you through the funnel. There is a funnel, but we're not going to force you through it. You can decide, well, I'm going to start at the awareness stage and I may be here for the next 6 months, right? Before I actually move to that consideration stage. I mean, I get your concept of the back and forth, but wouldn't it still be a funnel? It's just that they decide when they go to that next stage of the funnel using your content playground analogy?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things with that. I think first, my view is that the funnel is more of a retrospective measurement tool versus a forward-looking strategy tool. And so when you start to talk about, yes, there is a funnel. There are certain people that come in at the top and then certain people who eventually buy, which would be considered bottom of funnel, right? But when you think about how to design this with a playground mindset, there's a couple of things. First is explicit CTAs. So go over here to learn and you can stay as long as you want. It's all ungated. It's all free. Come learn. Or go over here to buy. And when you click go over here to buy, that's get a demo. That's talk to a sales rep. That's start a free trial. All of that is a very clear buying action. What happens with the funnel mindset is we try to trick people. And so it's like, oh, come over here to learn. But then all of a sudden there's like a form fill and now, aha, you've taken a buying action. No, they haven't. Filling out a form is not a buying action unless literally the form says sign up for an account. Like that is a buying action. And so making your CTAs very explicit and making it super easy for people to learn and super easy for people to buy. You're going to improve your sales cycle. So I know one of the most delightful experiences I had when I needed to buy something was clicking the contact sales button. Like, yes, that is the thing I wish to do. And I filled out the form. I told them my problem. I gave them my time frame, right? Like I was BANT qualified. So immediately a sales rep contacted me within like an hour. We set up a call for 2 days later, and I had a PO to them within 2 weeks because I was taking the buying action. This nonsense of like, if they had gated download their like media kit for their advertising and prices and stuff, that's not a buying action. Me downloading that, they had made that free. So I could go in and understand what I could do for the budget that I had. And so that's the first kind of different mindset is, understanding that your CTAs should be explicit and you should not, you're not tricking anybody into buying. I think the second thing is there's kind of a problem awareness and helping people think about and frame up problems. There's solution awareness and helping people think about and evaluate solutions. And then there's, usage, implementation, practice. Notice that nowhere in there did I say the problem you solve, the solution you sell, and support documentation or, how to use your product or service or how to subscribe and get all of this for free. So when you decouple that mindset that, okay, if I tell people that there are solutions that exist, but I don't tell them only about my solution, then they won't buy from me. And it's like, okay, but if you help them frame up the criteria to evaluate solutions and you influence how they think about those, they're much more likely to buy from you because you have taught them how to think. Right. And so again, this mindset that, well, at the consideration phase, they are considering me and another person or me and another product. No, at the consideration phase, are they considering all solutions? Are you in a bake-off scenario? Because I would suggest that if you're in an RFP or a bake-off scenario, you're at bottom of funnel. So again, some of these mindsets are limiting. And I was chatting with another marketer and we were talking about how the funnel is like a scarcity mindset, that because you're trying to force people down, and you're not giving them the opportunity to do other things like build a relationship for recruiting, for example, build a relationship for someone to champion you or refer you to somebody who's more ready to buy. Like when you think about it that way, the funnel starts pushing people out and excluding them instead of making it possible for them to come play. So again, if you think about the difference between the mindset, not just, well, if I just let you choose when to move, it's like, it's still a completely different mindset than the playground, where you're creating this space for people to build that relationship, be delighted, learn how to think, learn how to solve problems, learn how to evaluate solutions.
All right. So yeah, you said something and I want to ask a question around that. The whole idea of you create this space, and what I'm getting at from you is it's not limited to people that fall within your ICP, right? Because you could have people that don't fall within your ICP, but could refer you to other people who fall within your ICP, right? So how do you now create, or should I say, that playground? Like, how do you actually facilitate those people who don't fall within your ICP? Like, what would that content look like?
I actually think there's some real world, I think there's some real world scenarios for this, right? Like, if you look at, for example, content management systems, like CMS systems, right. There's elements of that where there's a governance issue that would potentially fall under kind of an IT or a software dev functionality. There's the UX, UI, which again falls under a different skill set. There's the ability potentially to for attribution or tracking, which would fall into kind of demand gen or marketing. And then there's, in terms of the actual content journey that someone like a product marketer or potentially even a salesperson would kind of understand to say, oh, this is the content universe that we need to create. And so we need a system that touches all of those people. Right. And so if you were to go on to, some of these sites, I mean, I think HubSpot actually does a great job of this, where they have a system, a marketing automation platform that also can act for smaller customers as a content management system. And so they speak to, here's the templates that you need for journey mapping. Here's, 10 tips to optimize your landing page buttons, which would speak to potentially like a UI, UX, web dev type of person. Here's your blog calendar, which speaks to how you actually get the content in there. And so they've got these different types of content around different clusters of topics so that you can go explore. And in some cases, the tool that they sell helps you solve that problem. In other cases, it's a template that they've created that they may use internally for users. And so thinking about, it's interesting talking about the ideal customer profile. You could also talk about the ideal user profile. You could also talk about the ideal, evaluator profile. And so especially with some of these larger sales, particularly as it comes into SaaS, you've got so many different people. Like I know, for example, at Atlassian, because we're a global company and we have, employees and customers all across the world, legal has to sign off on things, compliance, the procurement side of the house that looks at how is the data treated, how are these systems used, where does it pull from, data residency issues. Like I have to think about all that because somebody else on my team is going to ask me. And so when I go to a site to start evaluating this stuff, somebody being able to say, here's all of our compliance documents to just send over to your security team or your legal team. Great. You've made my life so much easier. Even though I don't know about or care about those things, I know I'm going to get asked later in the process. And so that's how you think about it, where you say, potentially, hey, if you're looking to buy and you're this type of person or customer, or you have these issues, here's the documents that you need to send to your legal team. Here's the security review and how we go about conducting those security audits for your security team. And so that's how I would think about it, is understanding the customer journey and all the different people that come in, and then understanding that, the buyer, the user, the decision maker, those people might be different people. And so where that content comes into play based on the types of questions that somebody might be asking, depending on what their actual role is.
All right, awesome. I love that response. That was a good one. So moving on now, this whole idea of the content playground. So let's make it real now. And, first of all, I want to talk about marketing and sales alignment, because as you know, there's always this friction between marketing and sales. And I think a lot of it is because each lack understanding and empathy for the other person's role and how they actually execute. So marketing is all about, we need to build brand, it's a long-term strategy. Sales is all about, we need that immediate sale. We need to close that deal right now. How do you use the content playground model to really get marketing and sales aligned around the same thing? Because it's easy to sell to marketers, because marketers, they love this stuff about content, about building relationships, that would lead to a sale probably later on, not necessarily right now. But how do you really get even the sales team on board with this, where we're saying, hey, we're just creating a content playground, there's no funnel, when they get to us, they get to us. And sales is like, yeah, but I need to meet quota this month. What are you talking about?
Yeah. So I would go back to two things. I would go back to the explicit CTAs, right? Like sales really only wants to work leads that are basically guaranteed to close. Like that would be the ideal, is if every lead from marketing closed. That's the one sales wants. And so this mindset of, we need to drive a certain number of MQLs. Well, what is an MQL? Well, it's based on all these form fills. Okay, so you end up junking up, like just saying, we gave sales 1,000 leads. And then sales push back and says, no, only 2 of those leads were qualified. Okay, well, that's where the source of the tension comes, because marketing says, well, it's not my fault you can't close them. And sales pushes back and says, well, it's not my fault you gave me crap leads. Right. So if we go back to that explicit CTA, where the only people sales is talking to are the ones that clicked talk to sales, that is a much higher conversion rate than, this person filled out X number of forms, or this person clicked on a certain number of landing pages, or whatever. None of those are buying actions. Those are education or search or potentially even accidental click things, right? It could even be, I think the best example of this that I always give, that I always feel bad about, is like, if, a couple years ago when I was interviewing for a job. And so I was like downloading literally every single thing to prep for the interview. And I'm like, man, the poor salesperson thinks that like this is a hot lead. She downloaded everything. She went on Contact Us and Contact Sales and I'm like, no, I'm prepping for a job interview, right?
Right.
And so I think that's a great example of, somebody clicking on anything other than Contact Sales or open a free account or download a trial or whatever, is not taking a buying action. And so I think that if you can bring sales and marketing together to say, yes, we understand that the volume of leads is going to go down, but the quality is going to go up. If they can see their conversion rates go up, they can see their sales cycle decrease, basically the average time to sale decrease, that's going to prove out that separating kind of the buy intent and the learn intent so that people can learn and not waste sales time. This is another one of my pet peeves, is like we treat the audience as an adversary, that it's like, oh, these people are just looky-loos. They're just wasting our time. Well, no, that's your fault for designing the journey in a way that forces them to speak to a human when they're not ready to be sold to. Like, it's not their fault that they're not ready to buy. That's on you for forcing them to take a buying action when they don't want to buy. And so that's what I would say the big thing is, yes, there's going to be an adjustment period if you switch from kind of the traditional funnel-driven mindset of MQLs, SAL, sales accepted lead, and then sales qualified lead. If you decouple those and say the only MQLs are the people who hit a buying button, but you'll see your conversion rates go up and you'll see your sales cycles go up, or sales cycles go down, conversion rate go up. I think the other thing is being realistic about when a salesperson is actually needed. So there's a lot of companies, and we do this at Atlassian, we have a self-serve motion where people can put in a credit card or they can open their own PO and they can just buy directly. They don't have to speak to a salesperson. And so in that case, this like learn intent versus buy intent, when you hit try for free, you're able to start for up to 10 users for any of our products. And so we don't have to spend time getting aligned with sales because people can just buy on their own. And I think there's a lot of companies that put people through too much to qualify someone instead of letting that person get into the product or get into the service. I was on a call with a former colleague of mine, and we were talking through, and he was talking about selling speaker coaching. And he's like, well, I think what I would do is I'd have a form and then I would get on a 1-hour call. And I was like, for your price point, that's wasting your time. Like if they're not ready to buy at this price point, you getting on an hour-long call with them to qual them or sell them it's not good for anybody. It's way too much time. Right. And he was like, that's a good point. And I was like, make it super easy for them to just enroll. And then at the higher price point, that's where, like one-to-one or a long-term engagement, that's where maybe you get on a 30-minute consult call. But you don't need to be doing that for your, this price point over here. And so I think there's a lot of this mindset that if somebody's not willing to buy or not ready to buy, oh, you just need to get on a call with them and then sell them. And I'm like, again, going back to, you're not tricking anybody into buying. And I never want to sell anything to anybody. I want to connect problems and solutions. Bring in a salesperson to help them understand and frame up their problem and see how your solution can solve it.
Awesome. And as you're speaking, it reminded me of an experience I had probably was 2 weeks ago, where I came across this company, this brand. I'd never heard of them before, absolutely nothing about them. Decided to click on the website just by chance. And in reading through, I'm like, this is an interesting piece of software. I see how this could help me based on what I'm trying to get done and the results I'm trying to deliver, right? So I'm looking through literally every single page on the website because they probably just have like a single sentence in terms of what the software actually does. But there's no like video that, like even a 3-minute video explaining, what the product does or how it works or, that whole learning phase that you're talking about. And on every single page, it's just click here to speak to, let's say the person's name is John. Click here to speak to schedule a call with John. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not ready to speak to John. Like, I don't know you guys. I know nothing about you. I'm trying to learn about the product and the company. Why would I want to speak to John right now? And it's funny because of that experience, they lost a potential customer. Because I did not want to speak to a salesperson because just like what you said, which is why I was laughing, because I know if I get on a call with John, John is going to try and sell me as to why I should purchase this product. And I do not want John to sell me. Let me learn. And then when I'm ready to take that next step to actually say, hey, all right, let me see if this is a fit for me and price, well, the name of the pricing on the page, which is another thing. Then I would want to speak to John. So I know for a fact that's definitely true. So
yeah. Well, and your experience right there actually gets at the problem with the funnel, because in theory, seeing a demo of the product would be a bottom of funnel thing. Like, clearly you're ready to purchase if you want to see the product. And you're all the way back kind of in this awareness phase of like, what do you guys even do? Can I just like see what let me just see how you think you're solving a problem.
Right.
Like, is it the problem I have, right? And so that demo video or the product video or the sales enablement list of features that's traditionally considered a bottom of funnel or purchase level thing is all the way back up in the awareness phase for you, because you don't even know what the heck they do.
Exactly. So it fits perfectly into what you're saying. So all right, so we talk about content playground. You went briefly into content depths in terms of, in case people no one really picked up on what you're saying, that whole, problem learning, solution learning, that's the whole content depth concept that you speak about on the last podcast. But what I really want you to go through with us right now is, let's say someone actually wants to make the business case to executives to actually implement something like this, right? All right, so they've listened to this podcast, that you've convinced them that, we need to take a content playground approach instead of a funnel approach, but they still need to sell it to executives. They still need to sell it to the CEO or the CFO as to why we need to take this approach, even the sales leaders. How do you make that business case for it? From the standpoint of, not from a marketer's standpoint, because we've been trying to do that for years and it hasn't worked for us. So let's talk about like the business case, the financial metrics. Like, how do we make that case for something like this?
Yeah. So obviously I'm a bit biased because I have worked in a couple of different companies that have kind of shaped my thinking on this, like ungating all the content. I have seen the power of like, man, that brings in a lot more traffic, because from an SEO standpoint, it's not locked in PDFs or it's not locked behind a form. So I've seen how that's worked out. In terms of things like, free trials or free accounts for a certain number of people, like, again, I've seen how that works whenever you give people the opportunity to get in and explore, compared to forcing every single thing to go through a salesperson. So there's an element of it where I would almost say, like, if you look at, there are a number of marketers who are doing this with their companies, like Kathleen Booth, for example, who works at Clean.io. She's talking about ungating content. Chris Walker, who's the CEO of Refine Labs, is talking about doing this. He's been doing that for his clients and customers. So there's a number of marketers who are doing this already and being successful with it. And so I think even HubSpot, for example, like, look at the brand that they built and the engine that they built off of content marketing, and right. Opening up the funnel to say, come learn, come to the conference. They've now got multiple revenue streams because they've got their conference, they've got their templates, they've got their CMS, their CRM, their map, like they have all of these different things. And so there's an element of it where I would say maybe just try it. Like again, I totally get that whole, like, we're going to break everything, but it's like, what if you could phase into it to say, okay, we had this piece of content. It was a gated piece of content. It was basically a lead magnet in kind of traditional demand gen funnel parlance. The plan was originally to keep it gated for 6 months. It's been gated for 3 months. Let's try ungating it and let's see what we can do to experiment with the CTA on this thing to say, get all of this for free. And then let's add a 2 or 3 minute demo video to it. And then we'll add a contact sales button and see how that converts. And so you can test into it to say, maybe you start ungating pieces of content instead of keeping them gated forever. You ungate them on a rolling basis. You add some distinct product tie-ins to it that it's like, explicitly, this is how we solve it. And then you update a couple of the CTAs on those landing pages to be very explicit instead of download this white paper. It's literally contact sales. Like, that's That's what we're doing. Same thing for companies that are gating case studies and gating their pricing. Dude, why would you gate the thing where a third party tells how awesome you are at solving their problem? So I think that's another way to test it is step one, ungate all your case studies and then start promoting those on social media and having do you think this, like, do you have a similar problem? Contact us to see how we can solve it. That's another way to test into it, so that you're not, if you got something that's working and you're like, maybe we could potentially 10x it, experiment and test into it with a few things. The other option is if you're not doing so hot, or if you're a startup, like just start with it this way, because you're not going to break anything if you don't already have it anyways, right?
Right. That's a good point though, and I love the fact that you said, the whole adding the contact sales button on it, because then, all right, let's say you even want to still gate the content, but you could probably create a duplicate landing page and say, all right, we have a test, a subset test audience with the gated versus the ungated, and we're going to run it for the next 3 to 6 months, and we're going to see how well both does, right? So that's a very good point. So just to clarify though, on the landing page, you're saying you should have 2 buttons, one that says contact sales and the other that says learn more if they just want to be educated right now? Or are you saying that it should only be one?
Yeah, so usually, what I would probably do is, what I tend to prefer is to do like additional resources. So basically the CTA button would be contact sales, would be the buying action, or would be see pricing or sign up for a free account, or the button would be the buying action. And then once you get to, say, the bottom of the landing page, you have 2 additional articles that's like, learn more about whatever the topic is. And then, or if you've got a tutorial or something like that, or a case study, and then you would say, see how, so-and-so did this, right? So for example, one of our kind of like flows in this case would be, we talk about DevOps. And so we talk about DevOps metrics and how you can measure whether you're being successful at DevOps. And then we say, as a CTA, go see how to measure cycle time in Jira. Go see how to understand your deployment frequency in Jira. You have the ability to sign up for a free account. So if you've already got Jira, this is handy. I can now see these metrics that I just learned about in Jira. I don't have Jira, but I would like to measure cycle time. Maybe I should try a free account so that I can start getting data so that I can measure my cycle time. You have the ability to keep learning more about different DevOps metrics, or you have the ability to see how we do it in product, or you have the ability to sign up if you don't already have the product, right? So we give you those options, none of which force you to speak to somebody or spend money right this minute. They allow you to get in and explore.
All right, awesome. And final question. So let's say someone actually wants to implement this within their company. Because if you said if it's a startup, then there's not much you really have to do, because you can't break anything because it's already there. But let's say you're a mid-sized, mid-market, probably large enterprise company, and you want to slowly make the transition over to the content playground model. Like, what are the steps that you recommend? Let's say the first 3, or probably even 5 if you can get it up to there, but at most 3, or at least 3.
Yeah. So I would say, in a lot of cases, bigger companies have, quarter-long campaigns, and that's a mix of advertisements. It's a mix of, blog posts, videos. It's a mix of white papers that then trigger an onboarding drip. And then there's also potentially like, webinar or something like that. So they've got all of these assets that they've created that contribute to this quarter-long campaign that they're going to run. So first thing in all of those cases is make sure that they're all cross-linked. So, and I see this even with myself, like it's hard, especially if you're having to like manually cross-link things, where you'll create all of these assets and then they all just live by themselves and they don't go anywhere. And so you land on the landing page for the webinar and you're like, but now what happens, right? Give people the option to read the blog post or download the white paper or get into the product if that's possible, right? So step 1 is take all those assets for the campaign that you already have, make sure that those are basically in a nice loop. And the only way to get out of the loop is basically sales, right?
Right.
They should always have a next action. Again, if you think about the playground, you can go in any order. You don't finish playing on the playground. Like, you can keep going. So that's the first step. Make sure that everything is linked somewhere. Second step, I would say, would be to progressively ungate the content. Anything that is a third party talking about how great you are, ungate that first. If it's a testimonial, if it's someone showing a workflow that they built, if it's a case study, if it's 5 stats about, some analyst firm that said you were great, ungate that. And I get it. Analyst reports are really controversial because they cost a lot of money. But if an analyst says great things about you, why are you locking that away with a barrier, right? Like, don't lock that away. So that would be the second thing, is anything that a third party is saying good stuff about you, ungate that immediately. And then I would say step 3 would be, again, you've got all of these assets already, slice and dice them into multiple things. So you've got a 10-page white paper. Why is that a 10-page white paper? Could it become a 10-part blog series that's now ungated with the ability, again, if you still want it to be gated, okay, then the CTA is download the full white paper. But if you break that into a 10-part blog series weekly, that now gives you 10 individual links to promote on social. It gives the author 10 additional links that they can promote on their own social media that you can then promote from the company handle. It gives you the opportunity from an SEO standpoint to tweak the content a little bit so that you're optimizing for the different keywords or the questions that people are asking that led them to the white paper in the first place. Same thing, if you've got a webinar, like, think about it from a mindset of chapterizing it. And there's a few easy phrases. So instead of saying, as I mentioned a moment ago, or as you saw on slide 5, don't say it that way. Say, once you've done X, you'll be able to do Y. You just talked about X, that's fine, but now you have a distinct point where you can cut it and you can trim it into smaller videos, which again, you can share on social, you can then embed into the landing pages. If you've got a webinar and a white paper that are paired, now you have the ability to slice and dice that webinar into 10 videos that then get embedded into your 10 blog posts, right? So doing it that way. So thinking about chapterizing those assets as you're creating them. If you've already created them, going back and looking at what are small tweaks you can make to chapterize them, and then the cross-linking. So those would be, I think, did I get you to 3?
Yeah.
That in theory are things you can do without breaking all the stuff you've already got.
All right, awesome. I love that. I think you just gave me an idea. The whole idea of chapterizing your webinar. That's actually good. I did that once, but that was really the intention to really do it that way, where you talk about having like a 6-week blog post and you say, hey, well, if you don't want to wait for the 6 weeks to get the full information, click here to download the full white paper PDF. So, but in terms of actually chapterizing the webinar itself, that's a good idea. I think I'm going to use that one.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's the goal. Give you stuff you can actually use. So it's from the theory to practice.
Exactly. And I definitely love that. Ashley, it was such a pleasure having you on. I enjoyed this conversation. I mean, I wish we could have more of it, but I don't want to keep you too long. I'm very gracious that you took the time out to speak on the podcast. So before we go, is there anything that you want to leave us with, whether it's to promote something or talk about something, or probably leave us with a tip or advice that I probably didn't, bring up in the conversation that we were having?
Yeah. So from a promotion standpoint, I guess if you want to see how I'm doing some of this stuff at Atlassian, like, go check out our Agile microsite, go check out our DevOps microsite, go check out our team playbook. Again, it's all free and ungated. So practicing what I preach here. And then second, if you want to continue the conversation, I'm at Ashley Faus on Twitter and LinkedIn. I love nerding out about this stuff. So happy to comment and continue the conversation on social media.
Awesome. And just to give you guys some clarity in terms of how her name is spelled, it's Ashley, Ashley, and Faus, which is Faus. Just so you guys can find her. Ashley, thank you so much. It was a wonderful conversation. Thanks for coming on and conversation with marketers.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Take care and all the best.